During the second half of this summer, I have often felt restless, unsettled, and twitchy. It might, in medical terms, be a form of anxiety. In spiritual terms, perhaps I'm not in right relationship with myself. Or, as a person with young children, maybe I'm just chafing against the challenges of a summer schedule that heaves from one way to another of being week to week in the absence of the structure provided by the school year. I've had the opening lines to the Deer Shaker hymn in my mind. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. I don't know where I ought to be. Or maybe there are so many places I fear I ought to be and am not that I become paralyzed, and then I berate myself for that paralysis. But I keep coming back to what my faith tells me, that beloved community is where we are in alignment with ourselves, with one another, and with our values, where we all belong and are whole and are free. And anything that brings us closer to its creation is where I ought to be. Come, let us worship together. Please remain standing in body or in spirit, and read with me unison affirmation number 486 in the back of your hymnal. I am being driven forward into an unknown land. The paths grow steeper, the air colder and sharper. A wind from my unknown goal stirs the strings of expectation. Still the question, shall I ever get there? There where life resounds, a clear, pure note in the silence.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents, teachers, and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, for those who care for family members in health, and those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days, and by those who rise above the heartbreak to challenge oppression in all of its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. May we stand in compassionate solidarity with our neighbors here at home and all around the world. May they and may we be instruments of a just and lasting peace. And I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like to lift today in worship. And let us pray. Spirit of life, Spirit of mystery and love, God of many names and beyond all naming, God of our being and our becoming, which we find within, among, and beyond us. As the heat of summer slowly begins to lessen, and our minds and hearts begin to prepare for the turning of the season, may we be mindful of the gifts we received during those times when our pace actually slowed down and we were able to notice all that was around us and within us. Remind us once again that when we move from our limited view, that we are often met with vast expanse and possibility, where awkwardness gives way to simple elegance. May we remember those wide open spaces that we experience in the world of nature and also in the realm of spirit. May we be grounded in the sacrament of service, which awakens in us the rhythm of life itself, and all gives way to the grace of wonder. May it be so. and amen. Eva, thank you so much. Josh, music's such a gift to all of us. I want to tell a story. About a year and a half ago, the UUA Board of Trustees voted to set up a fund called Black Unitarian Universalists. Black Lives Unitarian Universalists, Blue, it's affectionately known as. And it was up to our wonderful UUA stewardship department to figure out how we were going to fund it. And they started approaching major donors. And actually, the head of stewardship invited Rob to one of those solicitation visits. They were undecided when they attended General Assembly a year ago. What? The donor. And they're friends of ours, and I had talked to the wife and the couple, and she said, I'm ready to give, but my husband is hesitating. Well, at a very moving worship service, Rob and I happened to be sitting in the front row with them. And I knew this was a last shot to try and get them to give towards this fund. So I got on my hands and knees and I begged them to give to this fund. And the next morning they announced $1 million gift. But here's the catch. We have to match it. We have to match it. And we made a commitment as a congregation to come up with $10,000. Part of that we already have. But this fund goes to support the growing number of African Americans involved in Unitarian Universalism, to encourage programming and all kinds of wonderful enrichment that did not exist previously. So please, will you join with Rob and me in giving generously today and helping us match this $1 million gift? Will the ushers please come forward? When we live lives of integrity, service, and joy, generosity is sure to follow. Thank you.
A Complex Movement by Adrienne Marie Brown. Over and over again, it becomes known the peace we seek is seeking us, the joy a full bud awaiting our attention, justice in our hands, longing to be practiced, the whole world learning from within, the thrilling moat in the universe, laboratory, labyrinth, internalized demands. You are the one you are waiting for. Externalize love. Bind us together into a greater self, a complex movement, a generative abundance, an embodied evolution. Learn to be here. Critique is a seductress. Her door is always open. So what if you get some? We are going further, past reform to wonder. This requires comprehension that cannot fit into words. Out beyond our children, beyond the end of time, there's a ceaseless cycle, a fractal of the sublime, and we come to create it, to soil our hands and faces, loving, loving, and loving ourselves and all our places.
The poet Mary Oliver writes, "If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps joy is life's way of fighting back, that sometimes something happened better than all the riches and power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Don't hesitate." What a great joy it is and a gift to be here at Unity Church Unitarian. Rob and Jan, thank you for your gracious welcome, for your leadership in our association. Thank you to all the staff and members and leaders of Unity, for you are leaders in our movement. It is an incredible honor and privilege to serve as your Unitarian Universalist Association president. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment to this progressive religious tradition, because our tradition and our faith matter, and they are needed. And I know this personally, because when I was 5 years old, Unitarian Universalism saved my life. When I was 5 years old, the people, the ministry, and two very special religious education volunteer teachers, where I grew up at Elliott Chapel Unitarian in St. Louis, they dramatically changed the course of my life. I think of them, where I stand today, and all the things that have been a part of my life. You see, when I was young, my family was falling apart. A more accurate word would be erupting. There were a lot of reasons for it. It's complicated, but one was that my parents' marriage was in the midst of an enormous crisis, and they were fighting all the time. Our home was not a place of peace or joy. Our home was disruptive, explosive at times, and tense. Now, I share this story with the blessing of my parents, for they know the story well, a different side of it, I'm sure. But they also know the powerful difference that the church made in my life and in our family, and somehow they even made it through the other side of those many painful years. But I have another powerful memory of that time in my life. It was my kindergarten Sunday school class. The class was taught by a married couple, and what I remember most is how much they seemed to love each other and how much fun they had together. In class, they would play guitar and sing songs, and we as kids would dance and sing along. It was a place of joy, and I needed that joy. I felt free. I felt free in that class in a way that I didn't feel other places. I wrapped that joy and that sense of freedom and safety right tight around me. It was only once a week, for an hour, for a few months in my life, but it stayed with me, as did my love and my relationship with those two teachers. As Mary Oliver writes, if you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. We are not wise, and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps joy is life's way of fighting back. To be sure, too many of our children, too many children experience far worse. And studies increasingly show how these early childhood experiences can affect our long-term health outcomes, including the development of addiction and mental health challenges. But studies also show the outsized difference that a mentor, a great teacher, the small presence of real care can make in the lives of children who experience pain or neglect or trauma. This Sunday school class, even though I didn't have words for it nor fully understand its impact until years later, showed me that something else was possible in life. Something else was possible in a marriage. Something else was possible for a family. Something else was possible for me. And that glimpse of possibility, that glimpse of possibility, that feeling of joy and freedom, that gift of love, it gave me hope. And it sowed seeds that have continued to shape my life and my devotion to Unitarian Universalism and our congregations. Truthfully, this faith, congregations across this country, our people, have saved my life again and again. And I don't say this frivolously or lightly. I mean it. Unitarian Universalism taught me courage. It taught me to take risks for what was right, to not be afraid to stand alone with my values. It taught me to find my voice, to organize for justice, to love abundantly and boldly, and to remember the saving power of joy and laughter, community, and song. And today, in the face of an onslaught of injustice and loss, Unitarian Universalism, my faith, my community, continues to be a way of fighting back, continues to show up to help me fight back against despair and acquiescence by giving me hope and courage. Now, this hope that our faith instills is not about a guarantee that everything will be all right. No, for me, the hope is the fact that we can both hold the truth of the reality while not letting go of the fact that we all have choices in terms of how we will show up, how we will act, how we will give, how we will love, where we will put our hearts, our time, and our attention. That is where the hope lies. That despite the realities, I still have a choice. And we all still have choices in how we will live and where we will show up. And I'm eternally grateful for all who came before me and nurtured this faith, that it might be there when I needed it. Our communities matter. And when you give to your congregation, you are touching the lives of people whose stories you will never fully know. I know the people in the church I grew up don't know the ways that their gifts and how they invested in that church made such a profound difference to me. But that's what happens. That is what happens when we give to community. Now, not that long ago, I met a Unitarian Universalist congregation that had been through many difficult years. As powerful as our theology is, grounded in compassion and covenant, our congregations are made up of, well, human beings like you and me, like my parents, like those Sunday school teachers, imperfect, beautiful, struggling, hopeful human beings. And as such, we all stumble and we can break covenant, we can lose our way. And so this was a congregation that was experiencing the real challenges of human community. They had had fights with ministers and difficult ministries. They had had deep conflict between members, and this created anxiety that lived in the system. For more than a decade, nearly 2 decades, they were stuck in cycles of conflict. Anytime differences or disagreements emerged, the anxiety of the past would filter into the present, making the situation more difficult. Now, to be sure, there was also caring and friendship and love and commitment, but it was challenging. And then something began to shift in that community. It started when a lay leader began to ask the question, what would happen if our congregation simply disappeared? Would it matter? Would anyone notice? And with the power of that question, this congregation that had struggled so long with internal conflict and internal politics realized that they had a larger purpose and that they had better get to it. They began to see the possibility of something more for themselves. And in the end, I think this is what beloved community is about, how we are called into beloved community as congregations. It's both a recognition of the realities of injustice and imperfection and trauma and all the realities of what it means to be human, as well as the larger systems of oppression that we live in, and the capacity within our communities to sow seeds of possibility for something else. As Brittany Packnett, the Ware lecturer at General Assembly, said, we cannot just be in the work of critiquing and tearing down. We have to be in the work of building something new. That call to beloved community is that call to build something new, something different within ourselves. Now, I share this story about this congregation because I have seen too often how mission and vitality are undercut in our faith by silos of power in congregations and confusing and unclear decision-making and authority that exacerbates conflict and keeps new people on the margins. It's certainly what we experience in our wider UUA. And yet something powerful happens when we put mission at the center of all we do. This happens for us as individuals when we have a sense of calling and purpose, but it also happens for organizations and communities. In times of change, disruption, and uncertainty, there's a natural tendency for people to become anxious and overly focused on themselves. Institutions grow fearful and focus on preserving what they know, forgetting that precisely in these times of disruption and uncertainty, more is needed of us, more leadership, more love, more hope. And I believe we see this very similar dynamic playing out in our larger world right in this moment. We are facing dramatic shifts in our world. Technology and communication have opened up such that people are connected more quickly and more closely all across this world. But we are also facing the challenges of climate change and global migration. And as those challenges grow, we hear rhetoric of scarcity, isolation, and walls. This is a reactionary response that's shutting down and pulling inward in the face of change, rather than responding from a sense of possibility and mission, asking how we might respond, rooted in our values, to the changes that are before us, to the needs and the calling of this time. Faith and mission, a sense of purpose, call us out of self-centeredness, out of fear, out of individualism, to a sense of larger commitment. And in this moment, this sense of larger commitment, of mission and values, are calling more from us as Unitarian Universalists. Our communities can and need to be places of connection and collective inspiration, spaces of inclusive welcome and care where we can bring our heartbreak and be held in a community of love. Worshiping communities of real spiritual depth that help us glimpse the possibility of who we can be as human beings, so that we might show up in our lives every day with that humanity and that love. As I visit congregations across the country, I've been saying two things. Number one, that this is no time for a casual faith and no time for a casual commitment to your values and your community. And number two, this is no time to go it alone. The challenges that we face are enormous, and we are stronger when we hold one another, show up for one another, and right now we need to work harder in protecting one another. Because the beloved community of our congregations is about providing that safe space for a girl who needs a break from a troubled home, as well as providing sanctuary for a family who is facing separation and having their home threatened. Beloved community is the internal and the external, the deep commitment to health and vitality and deep caring within, and the recognition that we cannot tolerate racism, discrimination, and oppression without. Mission helps us answer this call to beloved community. And as Unitarian Universalists in all of our congregations, our job is to help our congregations live this mission fully. This is no time for a casual commitment to your faith and your values. And this is no time to go it alone. And as UUA president, I need your help. Because I believe that if we can put mission at the heart of all of our congregations, we will be a more vital religious force that can make a clear and measurable difference in the lives of our people and in the lives of our country. But I can't do that alone. The most important way that you can support the health and vitality of Unitarian Universalism is through your generosity and your commitment to your local congregation. Because it is our congregations where people find Unitarian Universalism and are changed by it and saved by it and nurtured and strengthened by it. And the most important way that you can help the UUA is by your giving as a congregation to our covenanted faith and our over 1,000 congregations. Just like the members of Elliott Chapel, who had no idea the difference they were making to the lives of the young people in our RE program. When you as Unity Church give fully and generously to the UUA, you are making a difference in the lives of congregations that you will never visit, and in the lives of Unitarian Universalists that you will never meet. Because our larger covenant of the UUA helps me support those congregations. In times of crisis, like that story I shared with you about that congregation finding greater health because they put mission at the center. And so I want to thank you more than anything for your commitment to this congregation, for your generosity, for your commitment to one another as a community of love. And I want to challenge you. Challenge you to strengthen your relationship with the larger UUA. When I ran for president, I had two key priorities. Number one, to strengthen our sense of covenant across our congregations. And number two, to help us put mission at the forefront of all we do. It's mission that makes sure that we're not social clubs, but that we are being the church, right? So I ask for your help in this work. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful for your leadership, for your ministry, for this church, and I hope you'll be a stronger partner with me in the work that we have to do to amplify our values, our core values, in this time and in this moment. I want to end with a prayer to just join our hearts for a moment, to give thanks for our ancestors, for everyone who came before us, who nurtured this faith of love and justice, who nurtured our congregations of joy and courage. I pray that we, as individuals, may be strengthened, that we, as families, may be nurtured by our faith, and that we, as a collective community, might strengthen one another and feel the deep bonds that bind us to one another. May the spiritual community that we practice strengthen our hearts and give us courage. May we all find the ways that we are called to make a difference in our own lives and the lives of others. May we not be silent or shrink back from the demands of love. And may we hold one another tenderly and faithfully as we unlock new pathways of joy and community, of change and risk, and of mission. May we share with one another that joy and that feeling of freedom that we're all fighting for. May it be so, and amen. Do you join hands?
We can.
Friends, if you're willing and comfortable, otherwise you can put your hands like this if you'd prefer not to hold hands or have a cold. In the midst of the heartbreak and the turmoil that touches every life in different ways, in the midst of all we face and all we live with, may we not forget that if we suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Joy was not meant to be a crumb, and it very well may be life's way of fighting back and reminding us what we are all fighting for. May we nurture more joy, more love, and more song into our lives and into our days. May we be led out in peace, and may we give back love. Go in peace, go in love.